but it was necessary from the US point of view to show that they are the superpower. So there would be, Ms. Davidson a while ago mentioned that there some would think that the bombings in Laos were the most brutal and the worst that the US ever did. I'm sure several other countries would dispute that. I mean, the Japanese would say, no, it's our country. No, the Vietnamese would say, no, it's ours because the Americans dropped more bombs on Vietnam during the Vietnam War than they did during the entire Second World War. And I'm sure the Filipinos would also say, no, it's us because in the Phil-American War, they, how much? 1/10 or 1/6 of the population? It's 1/6, yes. Because the Filipino population then was 6 million and about 1 million until, including the pacification wars, 1 million Filipinos were killed or died, as Jacob Smith, as General Bell said. The figure General Bell mentioned in that interview, but remember this was 1901, translates to 600,000. But 600,000 does not include the 100,000 that were killed in Batangas, and even the countless others in Samar and Panay, where they had those big massacres, island-wide massacres. So the estimate, a more reasonable estimate, which we find in several literature, would be 1 million from 1899, the start of the Phil-American War, to 1916, the end of the pacification. So, I'm being given the... Okay, you've heard a lot about the US War on Terror. So let's just look at the US presence in the Pacific. Can we go several slides forward to the US Pacific Command? Okay. This is the mother command of the USS George Washington carrier group, which docked in Manila just a week ago, no? So, well, you cannot read the text, small text there, so I'll read it for you. The U.S. Pacific Command encompasses 36 stations, about half of the Earth's surface. Another U.S. PACOM document says it's not just 36, but 48 countries. Depending, I think, on how many countries you count on the American coast. It is the home to more than 50% of the world's population, including the US, because this is US Pacific Command. It has the world's 6th largest armies. You have China, US, Russia, India, North Korea, South Korea. Asia Pacific is the source of about 1/3 of US trade, amounting to about 1.3 trillion per year. Another way of saying that is that 1/2 of world trade passes through the waters of Southeast Asia. That is why the Philippines is so important to them. And then you find in East Asia two of the second and the third largest economy, China and Japan, with China being considered as the US as its most likely or most potential peer competitor. Something which the US does not want to emerge. So, can we go again another 2 or 3? Another one? Okay, this is Colin Powell telling the Nepalese government that you have a Maoist insurgency that's trying to overthrow the government, and this really is the kind of thing that we are fighting against throughout the world. So here another ex-general telling the truth, but he was Secretary of State at this time. Now, why do we show this? Because, as we all know, US War on Terror, they say it's against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and the Muslim fundamentalists. But in Nepal, there are no Muslim fundamentalists. Powell was very explicit in saying it's not the so-called Islamic terrorists that we are fighting. It's the insurgencies. In this case, the Maoist insurgency. all over the world. And I think we'll get more of that from the next speaker to talk about the U.S. role in the counterinsurgency war in the Philippines. So now here comes, we all know also that Bush eventually became discredited. There were no weapons of mass destruction. The Iraqi people did not welcome the American troops, even if they had gotten rid of Saddam. In Afghanistan, which Ms. Davidson was discussing a while ago, the military plans to invade Afghanistan were prepared long before 9/11. So 9/11 was September 11. The invasion was first week of October, right? I think October 7. Now anybody who knows, who has gone on any military action knows that you cannot plan a war in 1 month, much less execute it. The war in Afghanistan was planned long before. As early as 1998, the U.S. Special Forces that were used in Afghanistan were training in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Difficult to pronounce, but these are Central Asian countries where the U.S. had military bases, and they were training to familiarize themselves with the desert terrain and so on, the language, the culture. And these were the ones that were used in October 2001. Having lost credibility and having lost an excuse, as they lost their excuse also after the Cold War, the U.S. now turns to Obama to give a new face to the war on terror. So Obama, and we have the next slide, campaigned and won the presidency largely on a promise of reversing the Bush policies of pursuing what he called a dumb war, as well as allowing the bankers to screw the economy. Now, just to make a long story short, because we don't have time, Obama has not delivered on any promise, except one. Because during the campaign, he did say that he will increase military activity in Southeast Asia. So that's one promise he kept. Also, he also said that he would transfer the troops from Iraq to Afghanistan. So he also kept that. But it is not true. It is not true that the U.S. had withdrawn their combat role from Afghanistan. I'm sorry, from Iraq, because there are still 50,000 U.S. troops there, plus still another unnamed tens of thousands of mercenaries. These are the private companies that are being hired by the U.S. and under the command of the U.S. in Iraq. And they're supposed to be there just to perform, to train and advise the Iraqi security forces, to conduct counter-terrorist operations, and third, to protect U.S. personnel and establishments, facilities. Now, all of those three, believe it or not, involve combat roles, especially in Iraq. So it's a big lie to say that the U.S. no longer has a combat role in Iraq and only has those three missions to perform. But the small groups, the small elite in the U.S. who decide American policy or decide and dictate American policy. A lot of literature would refer to the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Bilderberg Group. These are all, the core of all of these organizations are bankers, finance capitalists, industrialists. And they pull into their circle these politicians, these people like Obama, Clinton, and some of them even ran for office like Rockefeller did. And it is they who really decide policy, and it is no wonder that US policy now, globally, remains the same as that we had during the time of Bush. The the other change which Obama is trying to make, they are trying to give the impression that the U.S. war now is not really a war on terror, or not a war of terror, but a counter-insurgency war in different parts of the globe. And they are also trying to say that this counter-insurgency war will not rely mainly on military means, but on non-military or civilian measures. So they are giving again supposedly giving emphasis to delivery of basic services, the elimination of corruption, security sector reform. Does this all sound very familiar? It should, because it is Noynoy Aquino's. It is President Noynoy Aquino's peace and security plan. The 4 pillars being economic development, delivery of basic services, security service reform, and so on, which are largely patterned after the U.S. counterinsurgency guide.